the great questions of existence emerge as we compare what we perceive in the outer world of the senses with what we feel arising from the depth of our human nature. What are these great questions Rudolf Steiner, the founder of Anthroposophy, spoke of? They are the fundamental questions of life. Who and what we are, what our place in the world is, what reality is, if there is any meaning to be found in all of this. As Carl Jung once wrote, the decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not? Modern science attempts to provide an answer. Reality consists solely of matter, energy or fields, which are indifferent and purposeless. Complex organisms arose purely by chance, and life itself emerged as a property of increasingly intricate biochemical systems. Over time, these organisms evolved, and out of neurophysiological processes, consciousness arose as an emergent phenomenon, a byproduct of physical activity in the brain. And so it follows that human beings are not free. We are determined, fully or at least statistically, by physical laws governing fields, particles, and their interactions. Free will is an illusion. Consciousness has no causal power, it is merely an epiphenomenon, a silent, powerless shadow of the physical. Now comes the problem. I believe that anyone who truly reflects on this modern worldview has to find it deeply unsatisfactory. It strips life of all meaning, all value, morality, and free will. It even denies the existence of the self. Everything, our thoughts, emotions, our beloved relationships, our goals and ambitions, hopes and desires, joys and sufferings, they are all reduced to meaningless interactions of matter. All that we create or love is fleeting, doomed to vanish in the vast, inevitable cold march toward the heat death of the universe. Nothing lasts, nothing matters. And yet, despite this bleak conclusion, most people bite the bullet and accept it without further thought. But I would argue that even the most committed materialist, deep down, hopes to be wrong. Everyone longs for something infinite, something transcendental, though many intellectuals would never allow themselves to admit it. The inevitable consequence of the physicalist worldview is a crisis of meaning. As Iain McGilchrist states, the prevailing dominant account of a meaningless, purely material cosmos fails to make sense of value, whether that be truth, goodness, or beauty, just as it fails to make sense of consciousness. This crisis has profound psychological and socio-political consequences. In his book The Myth of Normal, Gabor Mate observes disconnection in all its guises. Alienation, loneliness, loss of meaning, and dislocation is becoming a culture's most plentiful product. No wonder we are more addicted, chronically ill, and mentally disordered than ever before, enfeebled as we are by such malnourishment of mind, body, and soul. The root of this crisis is the following. We have forgotten that the story we tell about ourselves, about what we are, what the world is, and our role in it, is the primary source of meaning in life. How is it then that this meaning crisis is not more apparent? I believe it is because we have learned to fluid compensate. We never really abandon our search for meaning. Instead, we replace authentic sources of meaning with substitutes like self-validation, building a legacy that survives us, differentiating ourselves as part of an elite group, shallow connections through social media, or numbing ourselves through addictions and distractions. These substitutes feel like meaning, but ultimately leave us unfulfilled. They do not address the root cause. Bernardo Kastrup, a leading idealist philosopher, puts it perfectly when he says that the moment it went wrong is when we started telling ourselves and started believing that the world we see is all there is, instead of seeing it as an image of something higher or greater. When we adopted physicalism as the sole story of reality, we severed our connection to the infinite and lost our ability to perceive deeper layers of existence. It is essential to recognize that natural science can only answer the what and how questions about the observable world. It cannot give us insight into the whys. Science can't answer questions about value, morality, meaning, and purpose. It cannot address these aspects of reality because its methods are limited to what can be experienced through the senses alone. Anything beyond the sense world is, by its very nature, unknowable to empirical science. However, science often oversteps its bounds, dismissing what it cannot measure. We know for a fact that the world we perceive is not reality as it truly is. We know from evolution that our senses only provide a simplified representation of the world, one tailored to help us survive and function. This limitation applies not only to our natural perception, but also to the scientific measurements, which are only extensions of our senses. Here lies the crucial insight. The only way we can come to know reality, as it truly is by being part of it. From that starting point, not from natural science, can we begin to uncover a deeper dimension of reality, life, and meaning. There is exactly one thing in the cosmos where we have insider knowledge, and that is ourselves. Our inner experience gives us direct access to a dimension of reality that cannot be discovered through external observation alone. This leads to the profound question: is the universe simply a purposeless mechanism, or does it point to something higher, to a deeper reality that underlies what we observe? Since that thing, if it exists, would not be one of the observed facts, but a reality that underlies them, no mere observation of the facts could ever find it. There is only one case in which we can know whether there is anything more, namely our own case. And in that case, we actually find there is. We should not dismiss that. Rudolf Steiner expresses this beautifully. True knowledge can only come when we enter into the twofold nature of the world, as knowledge of the external world and knowledge of the inner world. When we look more closely, especially within ourselves, it becomes evident that the physicalist worldview cannot account for what we experience. Not only does it fail to satisfy our deepest longings and existential questions, it also fails to explain our most immediate, undeniable experience of consciousness. As McGilchrist puts it, it seems to me that the reductionist account is contrary to scientific findings, unreasonable, counterintuitive, and shows a complete refusal to exercise intelligent imagination. Fortunately, there are alternative approaches and worldviews that offer a more holistic and comprehensive understanding of reality. Quite modern ones can be found, for example, in Whitehead's or Kastrup's philosophy. These alternatives can account for consciousness, purpose, and meaning. However, many people are deeply conditioned by the prevailing physicalist outlook. When confronted with alternative views, they often respond defensively or dismissively. Steiner himself observed this tendency more than 100 years ago. Once we have learned to explain things in a certain direction, we continue thinking in that way and can hardly be brought to truly re-examine the issue. My goal is not merely to criticize physicalism, but also to present and analyze a compelling alternative, a special form of monistic idealism called Anthroposophy. Anthroposophy, as articulated by Rudolf Steiner, provides a holistic approach to understanding the world and man. It seeks to bridge the gap between science, art, and spirituality. Unlike many spiritual traditions, Anthroposophy does not seek to abandon reason. Instead, it expands our understanding of reality to include the spiritual, mental, or ideal dimension of existence. Steiner called for a new worldview rooted in the thinking individual, a worldview that reconnects human consciousness with the cosmos while fully engaging reason and critical thought. My aim is to critically analyze the legitimacy of anthroposophy and its potential to address the limitations of the current scientific paradigm. I believe Steiner's worldview offers a meaningful and intellectually rigorous framework for understanding reality, one that integrates the physical, the intellectual, and the spiritual dimensions of life. Even for those skeptical of spiritual claims, the philosophical and epistemological basis of anthroposophy is worth exploring. At the very least, it challenges us to rethink the nature of knowledge in general, the nature of reality, and the role of human experience. I believe that anthroposophy can help us move beyond the limitations of physicalism, not by rejecting science, but by expanding it. In doing so, it reclaims a deeper sense of meaning, purpose, and connection to the world we inhabit. If you've watched this far, it shows me that you share my interest in these topics. So if you want to dive deeper into anthroposophy and its philosophical foundations, explore the limitations and pitfalls of physicalism, or if you are simply curious and open-minded to consider alternative views about who you are and what reality is, then consider subscribing to the channel. I want to provide you with a serious but open-minded space for thoughtful exploration and open discussion, so feel free to ask questions or share your own perspectives in the comments below. Let's help each other to explore these profound questions together and create a dialogue that moves us closer to an understanding of ourselves and the world we live in.